All right, ladies and gentlemen, let's go ahead and call the Committee of the Whole meeting for May 9th to order. Let the record reflect a starting time of 5 p.m. And with that, Clerk Boak, would you please take the roll?
Councilmember Hussein?
Here.
Councilmember Wood?
Here.
Councilmember Spatafor? Councilmember Garza? Here. Councilmember Jackson? Councilmember Brown?
Here.
Councilmember Daniels? Councilmember Spitzley. You do have a quorum of the committee.
All right, thanks so much. With that, we are to agenda item number 3. These are the meeting minutes from April 25th, 2022. Vice President Wood.
I would move the minutes of April 25th as written.
All right, there is a motion on the floor. Is there further discussion? Seeing and hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. That brings us to agenda item number 4. This is public comment on agenda items. We do have tonight 7 items for discussion or action. We also have 7 departmental budget presentations. So with that being said, if there is anybody in the gallery, that would like to make public comment, what we do as part of our committee of the whole is we actually take public comment on a first come, first serve basis. So we just ask that you come down to the podium, state your name for the record, and we'll give you 3 minutes. So with that said, is there anyone that would like to make public comment? All right.
Yes, my name is Pennison Adolph Burton. I live at 2000 Boston Boulevard here in Lansing. And I'd like to represent the Morris Park Pool Committee. And I'm 71 years old. In 1961, 2 or 3, I lived on the corner of Olds Avenue and what would be Logan or southbound MLK now, which is just a stone's throw over the bridge to Moores River Drive to Morris Park Pool. So as kids, we'd go over the bridge, turn left on Morris River Drive, and we could take the northern route, which would be a trail that all the kids made, right by the river, or what we call the northern route, which would be actually Morris River Drive Street, and walk down the street. So when we get to that pool, I remember the first time that I went, I had never seen a pool that big in my life because you can't see it from the street. And when you come upstairs and you see it, it's like, oh my goodness, it was huge. And what us kids did back then was we could go fishing, play in the backyard, play basketball, or go swimming at Morris Park Pool. And at that time, that was the Martin Luther King thing, and the racial tension in the United States wasn't the greatest. But not one time that I could remember anybody said, get those so-and-sos out of the pool, or white people grabbing their kids, because there's black people in the pool, get them out, as though we were going to wash off on them. So I'm saying all that to say, we missed that in Morris Park Pool. It's a great, great thing for the community, as well as the park itself. I can't remember, let me see, the last time I see anybody barbecuing or picnicking in that park. And that would be a great deal if we open that, refurbish that pool. And I think that would create more activity in the park itself. And primarily because of the fact that there's so much violence in this town right now, gun violence. There's nothing to do for these kids that are 15, 16, 17, 18, because that's kind of the median age right now, these shootings and murders in this town. I'm not saying that the pool would stop the crime, but if we saved one life because that pool was open, that'd be a big deal to me. I would think it would. So it's important that we have something for these kids to do. And where that pool is located, not on the south side, but kind of a south central place, I think it'd be pretty cool for not only the kids, but for the adults too. Just somewhere to go, something else to do, because back in the day, the city parks were fantastic. They had rangers there. You could do this, you could do that, you could make things. We don't have that anymore. So I think it'd be a big help to the community here in Lansing if we could get that pool open up and fixed up. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have anybody else? All right, come on down.
Good evening. My name is Bill Castanier. I'm president of the Historical Society of Greater Lansing. We're a membership group of about 300 members, but probably more importantly, we have 15,000 Facebook members. And they're an active group, but they're monitored carefully. One of the things, a reoccurring theme on our Facebook page, whether it's perception, reality, the perception is that the city of Lansing tears things down. and they tear down historic things. There's hardly a week goes by that somebody doesn't talk about a drive-in movie theater, which we didn't have one in Lansing, but or the Michigan and Gladmere theaters, tarp-offs, gyms. Now, granted, they weren't torn down, but for any reason like the city, or the Civic Center where kids went to dances. Nostalgia is really important. A lot of people go poo-poo when you say nostalgia, but poo-poo is really about placemaking. It's about a sense of a place that makes you happy. You want to recall the good memories of where you lived, worked, and played. Right now, we're facing a situation where we're in the next step of attempting to save the pool. We need construction documents. They cost $118,000. If we don't get those documents, we will not be able to apply for federal grants. We will not be able to go after big foundation grants. It's sort of a turning point in this situation. If we don't get the money, the pool is dead, frankly, unless somebody steps up and says, here's a whole bunch of money. We thought we had the opportunity during this recent round of the COVID excess money. We were shocked when there was no money in either state, city, or Ingham County for the pool. There was a lot of things in there that were funded that shocked me, frankly. I'm not going to get into a lot of details, but there were things in there that we pay millages for, that now we're trying to support an additional program. The pool is not supported by any millage, as you know. It's considered part of the riverfront trail, but no money really goes to the pool because of that. The pool would have been 100 years old this summer, August of 2022. More than 1 million people kids have swum in that pool and learned to swim there. What we feel is we're taking away a whole lifetime of memories for our next generation. If we save the pool today, there's no reason if we don't defer maintenance again, that this pool won't be usable 100 years from now. We've got a lot better technology than we do today. So that's why we're here, is to say we are in desperate need of those construction documents. We want to be in a position where we can say we saved the pool. I don't think you want to be on the other side of that equation. And I'm not making a threat. What I'm doing is representing what I know the people in the community will say. They'll see this just as if we tore down the R.E. Olds mansion again. It'll be that big a deal once it's gone and no longer used. So thank you very much. I appreciate it. And I wanted just to do a special shout out to Jeremy, who was my neighbor for how long? 20, 30 years. And I've lived in the city 56 years, so it's a big deal to me. I lived 2 houses from the pool for 2 years and swam every night there illegally during the summer.
And we appreciate that, and I know Jeremy appreciates the shout out. Thanks so much, Bill.
Thank you very much. Okay, we'll see you.
All right, do we have anybody else that would like to make public comment? All right, I see Dale on the move. Come on down.
Hi, good to be back, see everybody in person again. This is pretty amazing. I'm Dale Schrader. I live at 1101 Seymour, longtime Lansing resident. I'm a licensed builder, and I'm a member of a group called Preservation Lansing. And I'm here representing the Friends of Moores Park Pool also. This group is trying to save a national treasure, national landmark. This is the last chance, I really believe that. Since it was announced that 0 ARPA money was allocated to the pool, although 3.2 million went to parks. If the city can't show any commitment whatsoever to save the pool, how are we supposed to raise funds? It's like, what comes first, the chicken or the egg? You know, we won't give you money unless you can show us you raise funds. Well, how do we raise funds unless we can have some commitment from the owner? But we wanted just one chance to live to see another day. So we're not asking for $6 million. We're asking for $118,000 from WTA, the architect, for construction documents. So what are construction documents and why are they so important? One, without construction documents, large grants are almost impossible, such as the National Trust grant, $500,000, which we already received $5,000 from the National Trust for that first round of assessment, for the city assessment. And I'm told that, these people just don't give money on a pipe dream. Construction documents, It's shovel ready. It's ready to go out to bid to contractors. It pinpoints, well, that's the first point. Second point is construction documents nail down the cost to plus or minus 10%. It might not be it might be 6 million. It might not be 6 million. It starts at 3 million and it goes up with contingencies. We really don't know, and that's another problem, because how do you raise money if you don't know how much you need? Okay, so what comes first, chicken or the egg? We raised $30,000, 350 donors, $30,000 for that assessment. There's a lot of people out there that really care about that pool. One more time, though, I want to stress this. Without construction documents and city support, this project is pretty much doomed. And it's not to be dramatic or anything, but the fate of the pool right now, without city support, you can't raise funds. It's pretty much over. So it's up to you guys. Thanks.
All right, thanks, Dale. We appreciate it. It looks like Loretta's coming on down.
Loretta Stanaway, 546 Armstrong Road, resident since 1985 in the city. And I want to say tonight that I am grateful and thankful for the cooperation of the Parks and Rec Director, the mayor, and the council to have pulled from the language for the ballot proposal for the sale of that small section of North Cemetery, that objectionable phrase that it could be sold or, quote, otherwise disposed of, quote. So thank you for that. We appreciate it greatly. And we have a verbal commitment from the mayor that if it passes on a ballot proposal and the land is sold, that the funds will be dedicated to North Cemetery improvements, so we're happy for that as well. The last leg of that stool, if you will, for the three-legged stool is that when it does pass in the ballot and it's ready to be negotiated for the sale of the land, we want to have in place an appraisal. So you're on notice now. You've got till at least August when the ballot would be when the proposal would be on the ballot to take under advisement getting an appraisal on that piece of land, so when it comes time to negotiate, we aren't negotiating in the dark. And I also support the Moores Park pool and its renovations. I think that, as many people before us have said, and as you see on Facebook and in other places, it is a national treasure. It is historic. Right now, it's a gem in the rough, but you have the option of polishing that gem and restoring it to the piece that it was, where it was so important and vital to the life and quality of life of that neighborhood and the city as a whole. So please, give it some consideration, do what you can do. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have anybody else that would like to provide public comment? Seeing none. That takes us to our discussion action item 4B. This is a resolution of reappointment for Ms. Beth Graham as a second ward member of the Board of Water and Light for a term to expire June 30th, 2026. Beth, if you would come on down, you can actually come through these double doors. I'm going to have you sit at the table to your right, to our left. And then just to make sure that we can hear you, if you could pull that mic in just a little bit and turn on that green light, we'd appreciate it. All
Okay,
right, give it a
good.
test. Let's see how it sounds.
Okay.
Perfect.
Can you hear
Okay.
me? Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. So here's what we're going to do. My understanding is that you've been on the board, I believe, for about 5 years. Is that correct?
Yeah, since 17.
Okay,
Yes.
fantastic. So what we're going to do is we're going to turn the floor over to you, let you discuss just a little bit about yourself personally, maybe some of the things that it's unique because it's a reappointment, but some of those
Right.
things that maybe you've been able to accomplish in your first term, maybe some of those things that you're excited to work on in your next term. And then what we'll do is we'll open it up for questions from the body.
Okay.
All right, thanks so much.
Okay. Beth Graham, I am in Jeremy's, the second ward, live on Annapolis. Full-time certified residential appraiser for 36 years here in Lansing. So I took over Mr. Alley's place on BWL and then renewed. So it is quite an honor to be a commissioner and to participate in all the exciting things that are going on right now with the new plant, with the GM things. So that's why I'm kind of excited to, if I can stay on, to complete some of those projects and see what we have in the future going forward. So,
Okay, and we certainly appreciate that. We appreciate your prior service. We know that you've been involved in planning, and you've also been the president of the Realtors Association, so you have a pretty fantastic resume. That being said, do we have any questions from the body? Councilman Jackson.
Thank you, Ms. Graham, for your service. Just a few questions. First, are you aware of the climate crisis, and do you think you have a role as a commissioner of Board, Water, and Light in that? And two, what, if any, continuing education have you performed, I guess, since being on the board when it relates to the climate crisis and renewable energies?
okay. So, I do follow that, and I was on the National Association of Realtors Sustainability Committee. I'm not sure if it was just 1 year or 2 years, and where we got to go to summits and learn more about the climate and sustainability and what the real terms are to use for sustainability, and that was quite eye-opening. But I also have attended not since COVID, but where they offer us at BWL to take continuing education. And I've taken a couple seminars there and then traveled to New Orleans for a conference to hear more things about sustainability and the climate. So my position in being a realtor and an appraiser, I mean, that's like the top thing right now is to just everything that goes with climate and solar, and so I feel like I'm on top of that. So,
And I guess just because I asked you a few, I know it's a couple in a row, but what role as a board member, commissioner, do you think you play, and how will you use your voice on the board?
well, gosh. I mean, just by attending, and we're all offered the same opportunities to speak up about things that we, and ask questions. And I think the administration's really good about that, is letting us know what's going on, and if we have any questions, we can, drill down to exactly what's going on. So, and I'm not afraid to ask questions. I mean, I think they're always like, oh no, she's got more questions. But, and I might not be as vocal in some of the meetings, but on the backside, I'm always asking questions about, how the impact, and about solar and wind and all that. So,
All right, Councilman Garza.
Thank you, Council President. No questions. I just want to say hello.
thank you.
Appreciate your willingness to serve. I was a little concerned when I heard a rumor a while back that I thought that you potentially were going to be off the board, and then a few people told me that was just a rumor.
Okay.
So I'm glad to see you out in front of us. This is a non-paid position, so for
Right.
you being there, that shows your dedication to the city. I appreciate the Board of Water and Light transitioning, getting out of the coal game.
Yes.
So we leave a less of a carbon footprint for our kids. So thanks for your willingness to serve, and I appreciate you being here tonight.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Right before, Vice President Wood.
Thank you, President Hussein. Beth, it's this question that I asked you when you came down here, and for your first appointment here, and that is your feelings on selling the Board of Water and Light.
Oh, I don't feel like we should sell them ever. So I think
All
we
right.
have a gem. We are very lucky.
Thank you.
So before I turn it over to Vice President Wood to make the motion, for me, I guess my only question would be, I think the spirit of having representation with regards to the wards, no matter what board or commission we're talking about, or even if it's this elected body, is so that we have, folks that are deeply engaging individuals throughout the city, respectively, obviously, information sharing, asking questions, providing, opportunities for input, and then acting directly on their behalf. So I guess my question to you is, do you attend Second Ward neighborhood meetings? Do you attend the Second Ward constituent contact meetings? And if not, are you willing to?
I have before, and I feel like there's been some communication. I don't really know when they are all the time. And if they're on the weekends, I have a place up north, so I'm gone every single weekend. So, and that's been a hard thing too. If they were on a weeknight, I would be there for sure.
Now,
So,
Councilman Garza.
Thank you. So I can vouch, she has showed up to my meetings in the past, and then COVID hit. And
Right.
so my next meeting will be this coming Saturday, so it's Saturday of the month. And I know that you told me in the past, you have a summer cottage that you spend.
Right.
time. But she has, when I requested her attendance, she's been there.
yeah. And we had Dick Pepley come too, and unfortunately, we didn't have a big turnout, but definitely there to support and try to, like I said, help out.
Well, I certainly appreciate that.
Sure.
Vice President Wood.
Thank you, President Hussein. At this time, I would move the resolution for the reappointment for Beth Graham.
All right, there is a motion on the floor. Is there further discussion? Seeing and hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Motion carries 7-1. Thank you so much, Beth. We appreciate that. Because this is a reappointment, we don't need you there at council tonight.
Okay.
Because we're not going to swear you in or anything like that. But we certainly appreciate your service. And I also saw Kelvin Jones out in the audience, whether it be Kelvin or Dick or Brina Pooh, or we really appreciate the fact that you guys are always visible, present, and accessible. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much.
Absolutely. That being said, that brings us to agenda item 5, presentations, see departmental budgets. This is the last go-around, and I think what we've had over the last couple meetings is really, some really good conversations pertaining to budget. We're doing things just a little bit differently this year, to where we're not going over annual reviews. We're not taking a look at necessarily PowerPoint presentations. We're really trying to, focus in on and make sure that we're having discussions centered on the budget. And so all departmental directors, again, we have 7 that will be presenting today, but have been given 5 questions. As I have done at the prior council meetings, I'll read those questions so folks know at home what to expect. And then we will start to bring up our departmental directors. Our first question is, what is the difference with your budget from the current fiscal year to the proposed budget? The second is, are there any changes in services that your department is responsible for, and if so, why? The third is, are there any rate or fee increases, and if so, why? The fourth, are there any major equipment purchases proposed in your budget? And lastly, are there any eliminating, combining, or contracting of positions in your budget? And if so, please provide specifics. That being said, we're going to invite Chief Sotheby down from the Lansing Police Department. And as he's making his way into the well, I just want to thank him for his patience at our last meeting. So he was actually scheduled to present last. The meeting went long. He stayed the duration of the meeting. I reached out to him and asked him if it would be okay if we brought him down at the next meeting. He said absolutely. So apologize first and foremost, but also say thank you. We really appreciate it. All right, how's it going?
It's going well, thank you.
Fantastic. All right, I'm going to turn the floor over to you.
All right, thank you, President. I appreciate everybody's time tonight, giving me the opportunity to come here and present to you. So number 1, what is the difference in your budget from current fiscal year to the proposed budget? Not a whole lot. The proposed budget represents a 2.5% increase, which is mainly personnel costs due to fringe benefits. Number 2, are there any rate or fee increases, and if so, why? The answer is none. Number 3, are there any changes in services that your department is responsible for? If so, why? The answer is none. Number 4, are there any major equipment purchases proposed in your budget? The answer is none. And number 5, are there any eliminating, combining, or contracting of positions in your budget? And if so, please provide specifics. And I will add that I have requested some additional positions within the budget, reallocating some resources, one being an assistant chief that we've had on our books in the past. In fact, when I was hired in, we had 2 assistant chiefs. The additional social workers, a public information coordinator, which would take place of our current PIO, Officer Merritt, or Mr. Merritt, and a central records principal clerk. Thank you.
Okay. All right. First, we have Councilwoman Spitzley.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good evening, Chief.
Good evening.
And again, welcome aboard. We're
Thank
glad
you.
You're permanent now. So welcome.
Thank you.
Your budget does show a 17% increase in fleet equipment charges from FY 2022. Is that just general cost increases?
So I will turn that question over to Mr. Joe McClure. He's our budget director. He had more specifics on that.
Hi, Joe.
Hello, good evening. In speaking with Director of Fleet Services, Carl Dennison, he informed me that the increase is due to the a more accurate replacement cost for our vehicles. And he also informed me that there was a void for insurance, even though the city is self-insured, when they don't have an insurance pool at Fleet Services. And this increase, it's an increase of $275,000, basically set for replacement cost of the fleet, a more accurate replacement cost.
So, thank you for that. I appreciate it.
Yes.
So, of course, one of my passions is, the cold cases and the cold case units. And so can you give me an update on where that is? I know we got some funding from the state of Michigan. We got some funding in our budget. So where are you on that?
So we recently had a meeting with our cold case unit, and we are currently in works to bolster that unit through grant funding, possibly reallocation of some detectives within the organization already, so no additional positions, but just giving Detective Thalen some help with her caseload, because it is, as you know, it's a very large caseload. We've also been able to utilize several volunteers to help to do deep dives into cold cases to help Shannon out, Detective Thalen. And so, yeah, we're trending in a positive direction, and it is a priority for our administration.
Thank you.
All right, so when we say unit outside of the volunteers, we are talking about one person.
Correct, one person, one detective.
Because, I'm sorry.
Go
It's
ahead.
because, when we talked about it last year, and we did it as part of our budget priorities, and we worked to put more money in the budget, and, the state of Michigan allocated more funds, I think the thought process was that it was going to be more than one person. You were going to get, a tech and maybe a retired prosecutor to have like a fully robust cold case unit. And as we look at some of the unsolved murders, and I see that, we are solving some of them, but we still have a backlog. And so as we look at some of those and look at, bringing justice and closure to those families, I think it's important for us to really actively work on having a true, robust cold case unit.
Yeah, and to that point, some of our volunteers are former one is a former prosecutor to give that legal eye to the cases. And then we have some other additional volunteers that bring a certain thing to the table that a detective may not bring. So we're getting there. Right now, they're just volunteers, though.
All right. We have
yeah.
Vice President Wood, then Councilman Garza.
Thank you, Chief. A few questions for you. In the patrol unit, how many new hires do we have currently ready to be sworn in?
We just swore 7 in this morning.
7?
Yes.
Okay. So that means how many officers are we still down?
We are down, do you have that number off the top of your head? So we have 9 that just completed the academy. 2 of them need to finalize some testing before they're ready to be sworn in. So those two of the 9 didn't get sworn in today yet. But that would take us to, I believe, 197, 198, I believe. I don't have it right in front of me, but I can get it for you.
Do we know how many are slated to potentially retire the next fiscal year?
In 2023, we are scheduled to have 17 retirements in the calendar year of 23.
Yes. Are we still in the process of, and I use the term front-loading, is that something that we're still working on doing?
Yes, we are. Mayor's given me support to be able to front load, and we are sponsoring We're hoping for 13 if we're maybe going to get 10 to the next academy.
Okay, all right. In talking about no equipment purchases, I know that there's been some talk about the cameras that are in the community, and the fact that some of them are quite old and need replacement. Is there another source of funds that you're looking at for doing that, or what?
There's a $1 million grant from the Michigan Economic Department of, what is it, MEDC, Economic Development Corporation. $450,000 of that goes to the purchase of cameras.
Do we know how many currently are working, fully functioning of the cameras that we have?
I'd have to look right now because as you know, that some of them are due to fiber disconnects and cut lines. Some of them do go down periodically, but yes. And to answer your question, several of those that have been problem cameras in the past will be replaced in this camera project effort.
But you don't have a number currently of ones that are down, is that what I'm hearing?
I don't have a number for you, exact number of how many are down. I do know that the Pleasant Grove and Holmes ones that were down are now back up.
They are
I do
back
know
up.
they are.
Okay.
That was a fiber issue with a cut line. We got it taken
Okay.
care of.
All right. And then I see that the rental for the building on Wise Road is still at $125,000 to the school district. Have we had any negotiations with them to try to reduce that?
I have not had any negotiations myself. I know in the past, former Chief Green had had conversations with them, and it didn't land in our favor because we didn't have anywhere to go and they knew it. So, I mean, it's definitely on my priority list to get outside of that building that we're paying rent on. But as far as negotiations with the school district to leave that building, I have not had any.
Okay.
But I plan to.
All right. And then my last question, with the new positions that you're looking at hiring, did I understand you correct to say it would be 2 additional social workers?
No, just one. We
one?
had a social worker supervisor, and then the replacement for Miss Jan Bidwell, and then an additional one. So we have 2 social workers and 1 supervisor, 3
Okay.
total.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Just to piggyback before I go to Councilman Garza on the public safety camera, I know you can't tell us how many are down. How many cameras do we have right now in the community?
In the city,
Yeah.
well, we have some temporary ones, like for Common Ground and stuff like that, but we're into the 130s citywide.
Okay, and is it, I mean, I want to hear it is it science in terms of how we determine where those go?
It is, yeah. It's kind of just strategically placed throughout, based on input from council, input from mayor, input from community, crime trends, so forth.
Okay, all right. Councilman Garza.
Thank you, Council President. Good evening. Thanks for being here tonight, you guys.
Thank you.
Appreciate that. So I just had an opportunity to meet my CPO, Trevor Allman. Great guy. I'm glad I got to meet him. Now, how many CPOs do we have overall for the whole city of Lansing currently?
We have 13 total positions. They're not all filled yet.
Okay. Is there any, I mean, there's definitely a want from me, but is there going to be another CPO implemented by any chance in the second ward? Because I know the one that Trevor's on is Edgewood
Yeah.
and Myers.
I'll tell you, I would love to make 10 more CPOs because I see value in it. I do believe that the south side corridor down there needs another one because there's a lot to do based on, for one person, because you have residential and commercial there. And there's a large pull in each direction for that one person. So my goal is to, yes, put additional resources down there when staffing allows.
Okay, great. Now, out of those 13, how many positions are filled?
We have 10 full right now.
All right. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, do we have other questions? Councilman Jackson?
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Chief. So just reading through the first and second page, and the forfeiture fund, the drug law fund, and, looking at the budget and seeing how it looks like there's projected numbers for that. Isn't it true that people can have their property and money seized without being charged for a crime?
Yes, that's accurate. They can be.
And they have like just 14 days to figure out how to find the law to appeal that, right?
There are appeals that you can make to extend that.
Assuming they can find the right place. So since there's projected amount, does that mean, and it's increased from last year to this year, does that mean you're gonna try to capture more seized or forfeited property?
I'm sorry, you're talking the projected revenue or the projected budget?
Well, I guess if you budget it, then is that also, it's money coming from somewhere, and I presume if it's forfeited and seized, it's coming from forfeited, seized people, or how much of that comes from there?
I'm presuming you're looking at page 75 of the budget book, right? Or fairly close by?
Well, right now, I was just looking at this first,
Yeah. Or possibly
71.
Yeah, and so overall, the major change there happens to be a clerical error, which is partly on my fault. There was a blank document that I received, and I failed to follow up and ask why it was blank, based on the understanding in adopting the FY22 budget that within the forfeiture funds, there's some technicalities of how it operates, where on the state and local, or the federal and state local funds, the police department uses one fund for a given year and then the other fund for the following year. And at the time, not being too deeply involved with Tri-County Metro, I assumed it was part of that operation. So overall, the change to the projected budget is more of a accounting for that previous error, cleaning it up, and giving them the appropriations they need to operate.
Well, that sounds like a very long explanation. I didn't know that you even made errors. This is like the first one that I'm aware of.
Even the great can fall tremendous heights, and I don't claim to be great.
Okay, so maybe I can just follow up. Does the department have any policy as far as like its forfeiture of actually seizing people's money, for example, without charges? Is there like, we will only go for it if charges are brought, or is it just like how it is, the law can allow for?
I would have to reference the policy to give you specifics, Councilman. I don't have that in front of me right now, but I'll get that to you.
And the only reason I mention it is just because it's kind of known that civil forfeiture, like you can stop someone with a bunch of money on them and suspect drug activity, maybe search a car and not find anything, not even arrest them, not even give them a ticket, but suspect it. And they have to, in 14 days, file an appeal, go through the process. So I guess where are we on that? Because for all the people that, don't have drugs or aren't the targets that they are supposed to be, it just hurts the relationship a little bit. They're like, I didn't even get charged, and they took I had 10 20s that I had on me because I was gonna go to the casino, whatever it is. So I just wonder where we are on that.
Okay, I'll get you that.
Thank you.
Vice President Wood?
I'm sorry, I had one question I forgot to ask. Considering that we're looking into some other issues, we have a wrecker, with the police department, authorize a wrecker service for picking up cars in accidents in the city of Lansing. And that goes through LPD. Do we make sure that the wrecker services that we're using have current licenses?
Yes.
Okay, and how do you do that?
I believe it is the sergeant in charge of our traffic unit that confirms that.
Okay, and they're making sure that they're also licensed through the city, correct? Not just the state, but through the city as well.
I believe so, if they should
Okay.
be, yes.
If you could double check on that, I would appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, do we have other questions? Seeing none, we certainly appreciate you gentlemen. Thanks for coming down.
Thank you.
Very, very helpful.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you. That brings us to Downtown Lansing Inc. We do have Kathleen Eggerly. I believe it's just Kathleen tonight. All right, come on down. How's it going, Kathleen? Good. It's good to see you. All right, so you saw how it was done. We're going to go ahead and turn the floor over to you so you can go through those 5 questions and provide answers, and then we'll open it up for questions from the body. Okay?
Okay.
Thanks so
All
much.
All right, question 1, what is the difference with your budget from current fiscal year to the proposed budget? The income has been increased and subsequently so have the expenses to provide the services requested and needed for downtown and our businesses' recovery, which will help us lead to a stronger, more sustainable future. Question 2, are there any changes in services that your department is responsible for and why? Yes and no. Yes, out of necessity due to the pandemic, we've become more entrepreneurial in our programming and the services that we provide. You've probably seen, and I think I've talked about with council before, we've become less event-focused and more focused on the necessary small business support. However, the no side of it is we're still providing our core services. Question 3, are there any rate or fee increases? No. Are there any major equipment purchases? No. And are there any eliminating, combining, or contracting of positions in your budget? No. Yes.
All right, thanks so much. Councilwoman Spitzley.
Thank you, Mr. President. Hey, Kathleen. I know, because I'm on the committee, that the DLI are looking at ways to make our downtown more robust, and one of them is housing. Can you tell the council a little bit about that, about what we're doing?
So there's a couple of ways that we're looking at housing. One of the ways is as we look at the larger vacancy rates, primarily when it comes to the large office buildings, we're working right alongside the city, partners at LEAP and LEDC to see which buildings could be kind of transition into more residential units, where that funding can come from. But then another part of that is with the kickoff of our comprehensive market analysis and the next 6 to 9 months of researching all of the properties, any available surface lots, properties that maybe are underutilized, and seeing where it makes sense for residential and the models and types of residential that can succeed and has a demand here within the downtown as well.
Thank you. I don't disagree with looking at the residential part, but having said that, your revenue comes from commercial property. So every property that you turn into or suggest turns into apartments or housing, or that is something that comes off the books. So how are you looking at adjusting that?
So I think there's a couple of things that we're looking at. When we're looking at residential conversion, for instance, a lot of those are already existing commercial spaces. So looking at opportunities where the first floor would still stay commercial, and then second story and above look at residential. But also, as we look at our downtown environment, and what COVID has shined a bright light on is that we need a downtown that functions in a more 24/7 capacity. And without the addition of residential, we will not be able to do so if we continue to focus just on a daytime workforce and the hours of operation and businesses that fit that model. So, again, working alongside with our partners and being really strategic at what will serve the best long-term needs of our downtown to continue that commercial real estate. And again, the CMA, Comprehensive Market Analysis, will also look at commercial opportunities for infill and upfill, but right hand in hand with residential and working alongside those entities whose focus is more residential.
And how many storefronts do we have vacant right now?
Well, if you're looking at first floor retail, it's a moving target. We went from 18% vacancy rate to right now we're at 35. We were at 38, so we've gone down a little bit. And we have a number of businesses on target to go into those retail spaces by this summer as well.
And are you looking at encouraging them based on the changes in dynamics with the state workers and the fact that they're looking at their models differently than what they were 4 years ago?
We definitely have to, yeah. So we're looking at diversifying the business mix while addressing the vacancy issue.
Okay, thank you.
Do we have other questions? I guess my only question, and I've asked this before. So when we talk about critical mass downtown, first, do you know, there's a variety of housing downtown, so I guess I'll just talk doors. Do you know how many doors we have, how many units we have right now of residential downtown, roughly?
Let's see, I know over the last 2 years, we've added 500 new residential doors, if you will. So I don't want to speak out of turn, somewhere between 1,000 and 1,500, and that's probably a little bit low. I can get you those exact numbers.
Okay, and I guess I'm curious, and I'm sure we've studied it, and I'm sure we have at least a ballpark figure in terms of really sustaining, after 5 and weekend business downtown. I wonder what that number is that we're shooting for, because there has to be.
For residential?
Yeah.
Well, I can say in 2018, a study was done that showed we were short 12,000 residential units for the downtown district. DLI's focus through our strategic action plan is to have 2,000 more residential units by the end of 2025.
That's what I was looking for. Thanks so much. Okay, seeing no other questions, Kathleen, we appreciate you coming down.
Thank you.
Thanks so much. That takes us to assessing, and we do have our assessor, Susan Frischman, on hand, so we're going to go ahead and bring Susan down. Sharon. What did I say? Sharon, I am so sorry. Sharon, how are you doing? It's good to see you. Yeah.
There we go. Okay. Our budget's pretty simple. We're mostly people and supplies. But I'll go through the questions. The difference between the current budget and the previous one is basically a small increase in temporary help. One of our goals is to get back on our project of updating property information, taking new pictures. Some of the pictures we have of properties are over 20 years old. So that's part of our project. We have a little bit built in there in case we need appraisals on more complicated properties. But that's about it. Any changes in services? No. Any rate increases? We don't charge any fees for anything. No major equipment purchases. There's no eliminating, combining, or contracting of positions in the budget.
Okay, so that was simple. Do we have any questions from the body? Councilwoman Spitzley, Councilman Garza, then Vice President Wood.
Thank you, Mr. President. So how often do you do like a review of your role to see whether or not, there needs to be changes in the assessed values?
That's done annually.
Okay, it's done annually?
Yes.
And can you explain the process by which someone would appeal?
Sure. Of course, they can come talk to us any time of the year. If they want us to, we can review their property information with them, take a look at some comparable sales, that kind of thing. Formally, they can appeal every March after they get their assessment notice in February. For residential property, they're required to make a local appeal first before going on to the Michigan Tax Tribunal. Everything we do is you can appeal it. So even if you don't like what the local board of review did, you can appeal that further to the state. So that's because the assessment process is annual. That's an annual process as well.
And how much of that annual review is subjective?
Subjective?
Yes.
Well, that's kind of an interesting question. Valuation of property is not, black and white. It's not all numbers. There's a lot of different things. I always tell people, like with residential property especially, there's a lot of emotion that goes into usually every purchase. Maybe you paid more because your mother lives down the street, or maybe the sale was affected because the seller ran into some hard times and had to get rid of their property. So it's really not an exact science ever. So the review process is pretty standard. We rely on the taxpayer to bring information as well, instead of just coming in and say, oh, my taxes are too high. Bring us some data. We make sales information available online, or if they want to come in, we like to talk to everybody before they go to board review, share sales with them then, take a closer look at it. If it's something that we agree is too high, we will sort of put in the request to the board of review to lower it for them.
So you couldn't lower it before it goes to the Board of Review?
The official action would be, at that point, I'm done with the role, I can't make any changes to it. But, so officially, it would go to the board. But if we agree that it's overassessed, we make a recommendation to the board to lower it.
Okay, thank you.
We have Councilman Garza, then Vice President Wood.
Thanks, Council President. Good evening.
Hi.
What's your name again? I'm sorry.
Sharon.
Sharon, okay, I almost said Susan, sorry. Thanks for being here tonight. Just real quick, I see that the retirement fixed benefits is down 22.2%, and the city 311 service is up 7.5%. And then also it says changes to the assessing budget includes $40,000 for 2 contractual workers. Are we down the 22.2% because we're losing some of those workers that are paying into the OPEB, and we're hiring contractual workers instead?
No, the contractual workers will be, we do have 2 contractual workers in the office right now that have been there for quite a few years because we struggle to hire people for a variety of reasons. The 2 contractual positions in the budget are just for, we want to hire some college kids to go out, take pictures, gather information for us. So it's a temporary job. As far as the benefits and that kind of thing, I'll let Jake talk about that.
All right, Mr. Brower.
For active personnel, benefits are increasing in a general trend as within previous years. For retirement fixed benefits, these are being impacted by the same effects as seen in other departments from the proposed change in funding strategy for our OPEB.
That doesn't answer your question, does it?
No, I mean, can you dumb it down a little bit for us, sir?
Repeat the question for me so I make sure I address it fully.
I want to know why there's a negative 22.2% for the retiring fixed benefits.
Yep, and so the major impact here is we're moving from a model for our OPEB plans, which is a pay-go system, into an actuarially determined employer contribution. The big impact here is largely that twofold. There's the changes that were made the previous fiscal year to reduce the administrative costs of our combined plans. And then secondly, by paying the actuarially determined employer contribution, there's 2 major plans that we have. There's the police and fire plan, which is more underfunded, and then the employee retirement system plan, which is better funded at the moment. And overall, by paying the amount that the actuary says we need to close the funding between those 2 systems, that means we're paying more for the police and fire side and less for the employee retirement side, which is sufficiently funded by the state's definition.
Okay, that does make sense. And I guess just for clarity, the 311 workers, how many contractual workers are within that department?
There's only full-time workers, and I believe it's a total of 7.
Okay, no contractual workers. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I think we had six representatives, and I think we have 1 supervisor, correct? Yeah. Vice President Wood.
Thank you, President Hussein. A couple questions for you. You had mentioned in reference to Councilmember Garza's question, you have 2 contract positions that you've had for some time. Do you have vacant positions right now?
Oh, yes.
Why have they not been offered full-time employment?
Well, we're actually, we're actively advertising for 2 positions aside from the contract positions. We have from time to time, and we did not hire contract people until we had already exhausted advertising and that kind of thing. It's an issue sort of twofold. There's a lot of problems with getting certified assessing people in there, and because of the requirements for experience, that we had no one apply that qualified. So we went with the contract people to get people in there. They both actually would qualify for the full-time job, but excuse me. The other issue is that a lot of people don't want to work full-time nowadays. They're working moms. They want flexible schedules, and especially since the last 2 years with COVID and daycare has been such a nightmare for folks. It's hard to find somebody that can commit full-time. But I mean, we can periodically go out and advertise again. Right now, though, there are 2 positions we're trying to hire, and we're having a heck of a time.
So you're saying that the current contractual positions do not want to be hired full-time? Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Okay. My next question is, you talked about the tax tribunal. How many cases do we have before the tax tribunal right now?
In the full tribunal, this is a great time of year to ask me because the deadline for commercial and industrial is May 31st, and I've only got 1 new one in so far. So there's probably about 7 or 8 outstanding in the full tribunal right now.
Okay. And of those 7 or 8, have you looked at what the potential liability could be to the city?
Yes, I keep a spreadsheet on that, and
Okay.
so we always know. And I share that with Jake and anybody else
Do you have that number
that's...
off the round number off the top of your head?
Oh, gosh, no.
Can we get that number?
Sure.
Thank you. Those are my questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there other questions? I'm trying to wrap my mind around how big of a problem we have with regard. I think the function of the assessor's office is critical. How many funded positions do you have?
We have, I think it's 10 or 11 funded positions.
Okay. And right now we have, I know you're working out filling 2, but how many funded vacancies do we have?
There are 4 if you
4 total.
count the 2 contract people.
Okay. All right. And I understand we have 7 or 8 before the tribunal now in terms of appeals. Historically, what do we see? Or I should say, what does the Board of Review see as a number, prior to? So that piece in the appellate process prior to the tribunal. Is it 10, 30, 40?
Well, I was going to say, when I'm talking about the 7 or 8, that's full tribunal. We also, small claims will have probably, at least a dozen every year, if not more, which is not too bad. This year, we had a very unusual Board of Review in that we had more commercial appeals than residential appeals, which is amazing because just the sheer number of residential compared to commercial, so we're actually going to cut out a whole day next year because appeals have gone down.
Okay. And I do think our city attorney wants to interject.
I think the assessor is referring to some of the small claims in tax tribunal. We handle the full tax tribunal cases.
Well, Jim, no, I do handle the full tribunal as well.
Pardon?
I do handle the full tribunal appeals as
The ones
well.
we just settled, we had two, now we settled one, so that we've got one left in our litigation.
That you guys are handling.
Yes,
But I have another 7 or 8 full tribunal.
okay, that's not, okay, got it.
Okay. Do we have other questions? Seeing none. Sharon, thank you so much.
Thank
Really
you.
Appreciate you coming down. All right, that brings us to, and I see Scott Keith coming in right now, so that takes us to LETFA. So we do have the president and CEO of LETFA with us, with maybe a few friends that we'll let him introduce. So come on down. All right, so just go ahead and pull that mic close, make sure the green light's on. How are you two doing?
Good, Council
Good.
President.
Good to see you. All right, Scott, we're going to turn the floor over to you.
Is that on and good? Excellent. First, I'll just introduce, because fairly new, this is her first budget cycle with us. Michelle Green is our finance director at LETFA, and this is her first year in going through the budget cycle, so she's excited to be here and answer any specific questions. I will tell you that I did a little bit of a hybrid. I gave you a presentation and have information, and I'm going to try to answer the questions kind of as they come through in a brief narrative if I can. Stop me if you just want me to answer questions too.
Nope, go for it.
All right. So obviously coming out of COVID, the hospitality events facilities were specifically hit strong, and we're climbing. I will say it's great news. We're climbing at a faster rate than what we had predicted. So when I'm asked specifically about what is different in our budget for next year, FY23 versus FY22, the big change is that we anticipated about a 40% return rate, and now we're predicting about an 85% return rate. And what I mean by that is returning to about 85% of capacity for events. We're still not seeing everybody back. We're certainly not seeing everybody spend, and that's going to have other factors moving forward. I think inflation and rising costs are going to continue to be a challenge. But if you ask me what our question was about why we're asking a different ask this year than in another year, it's part of the climb back out of the pandemic for our industry. We are still very specifically challenged versus other industries. And one of the big challenges that we're facing, and I'm sure you all will hear it many times over, is the staffing, as Sharon just said, staffing, trying to find help. And so that's creating limitations on some of what we do at the Lansing Center. So some of our food service operations are having to be changed just because we don't have enough servers. We don't have enough cooks. These are positions that we're just not finding bodies for. And we'll train you, but they're just not applying. So if someone comes in and fills out an application, we almost hire them on the spot. That's the kind of aggressiveness we're trying to get to. But it does create some problems at the Lansing Center and even at the stadium with having enough people where, if you've been to a game, you might notice that there's a little bit longer lines at the concession stands, or a concession stand may be closed. It's because the Lugnuts just similarly don't have enough food service staff. So these are challenges. They're going to continue. The rising costs of particularly food items, and not only that, but trying to get certain food items is another challenge that we're consistently facing, both at the Lansing Center and really all three properties. And any given week, it could be something we're not expecting. So a lot of what's being booked and then the particulars about an event are very last minute, which is a whole nother challenge. And then I will say that, rising costs of fuel and other utilities are only going to continue to exacerbate our challenges with our budget. So, what changes to the services that LETFA provides? There are no significant changes. We will continue to provide the same service that we always have. Some of our events we review annually. We may add some events, get rid of some events. It's just the natural cycle of things. So I won't say we're changing any services we provide, but we just certainly will alter them from year to year based on what's new, what's working, what's not working, et cetera. So, management positions, we will be always evaluating our management positions, whether we combine them or eliminate them. Again, is based on what's changing in our event cycle or where we see things going. There will be some combining of positions. Michelle herself came in and has since she's been hired, had to rebuild an entire finance department. So she took a time to evaluate, do we need these type of positions? How many positions do we need? And so that's been something that we're going to constantly look at. Will we be outsourcing? I will say we will be outsourcing some of our marketing and PR functions, which we have from time to time in the past as well, but we'll be continuing to do that for the time being. None of our CBA covered positions have been eliminated or combined. Rate or fee increases. So we every year annually look at different rates, do comp sets, comparative sets for other facilities, other events to see where we're at. Certainly this year, our menu at the Lansing Center has had to do some significant changing to rates. At the golf course, the only rate you'll see changed is our cart rental rate, and our leases for the carts went up this year in addition to the cost of fuel rising as well. So that's the only rate that you'll see increased. And again, the lug nuts certainly made some rate increases, mostly to their food costs. Major equipment purchases. So yes, we do have some major equipment purchases and really major repairs that we have budgeted in this coming fiscal year, mostly around IT equipment, IT software. We do plan on getting our signage updated. So the side of the Lansing Center, that marquee is out, as well as the ones at the stadium, and they need to be provided because they are part of sponsorship agreements. So we need to replace those. So we're looking at moving to Daktronics and leasing those out, and that's part of this budget cycle. Just some quick highlights if you want to look at the budget. We gave you historical numbers so you could see that we're trending back in the right direction. And the only thing that did adjust a little bit was a little bit higher city contribution this year at the Lansing Center to trying to climb back out of this big hole that the pandemic caused. We used up a lot of our reserves. We did apply and get some grants that helped us keep moving, but we certainly need to do that. Biggest thing I see at the Lansing Center is, and I know that this group has heard me often talk about changing the funding model. I've, during COVID, certainly spent a lot of time working the angles on trying to get that changed. There is a new Public Act 340 that is available to us that was passed during COVID, and that allows for an additional increase in hotel tax that could go directly from the county to an authority that manages these type of facilities. It will take getting not only the county on board, but the Convention and Visitors Bureau and the hoteliers. I think this is a great opportunity to make a change that will help the city and us. Jackson Field, the
Can I
biggest.
stop you real quick?
Yes.
You have a couple questions. Oh, never mind.
Nope. All right. Jackson
You
Field.
want to take the, okay, we're going to take the moment. Councilwoman Spitzley, go ahead.
Yeah. So my first question is, did you guys receive any ARPA dollars separately? Like for tourism, because.
So we did not receive anything. I know we're in this budget cycle getting some funds from the city. We did not get anything from the county or from any federal.
Okay. And are you not allowed to apply on your own for ARPA dollars?
We are not. Because of how we're set up through the city, we would have to have the city's application go on our behalf.
Okay, thank you. So I'm looking at your Lansing Center affiliated agency budget, LEFBA, and like the first line for revenues, building rental, it shows a 1,722.2% increase change. I know we've been in COVID for 2 years, so my question is, so for reference, I would guess, what was it, if you can give us a frame of mind of what it was in 19 and 20, so that we have a frame of reference?
It was just shy of $1 million.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's why I said we're about 85% of where we were pre-COVID with this budget.
And the reason why I asked, because I figured it was COVID, but if someone's looking at these numbers, the average person's looking at them. I mean, when I first saw them, I was like, oh my gosh. So I asked the questions that I think a lot of people would ask if they're watching. And so a lot of the numbers here that represent significant percentage increases are because this is the anticipated revenues that you're going to get in 2023 post-COVID, I guess, is the post-COVID.
Yes,
Okay.
and we're very optimistic. We are already seeing numbers above where we were planning to be for this year. So if things can stay that turn, again, the big challenge is the rising costs right now. And that's where our profit margins on food and on other pieces are just way slimmer than they normally will. So it would be. So it's creating additional challenges. So
And you talked about major repairs,
Mhm.
and I see that you had some pictures, demonstrations. Are those the major repairs that you're talking about? And could you talk about those a little bit?
Yes, so I did include some pictures so you could get an idea that, most people come into the Lansing Center and it looks great. It really does. For a 35-year-old building, it's still in great condition. I would say that it's been over 15 years since our last renovations and improvements has happened, and so it's starting to look a little tired, starting to look a little dated. And again, most people wouldn't recognize that, but there are things that you can't see, and so there are roof leaks starting to happen. Our domestic cold water line, which is original to the building, 35 years old, needs to be replaced. That's about a $70,000-ish cost replacement. We have a balcony area that's over by the river that collapsed last year, 2 years ago, just as COVID happened. We replaced half of it about 6 or 7 years ago. The other half needs to be replaced. And that prevents us from doing some events over on that side of the building. That's about $150,000 repair. So there are some other things, again, roof leaks. If we had the funds, we probably need another $15 to $20 million. Our safety and security equipment in the building is getting aged. Our fire alarm and control panel is analog. We have to pay a third-party service provider to accept the analog and then send a digital signal to the fire department, which is time and money that we think, could be better suited. And I'm worried that, that could present a problem down the road. So there are, significant improvements that need to be made to the Lansing Center very, very soon.
All right, and I wanted to make sure that I afforded an opportunity. I thought we had timely questions, and I didn't want the moment to be wasted. That said, it did look like you had more presentation. Is that correct?
I have plenty. I just wanted to talk about the highlights. Jackson Field, certainly the utilities is the biggest increase. We're also doing maintenance and repairs over there. A lot of concrete that's, again, 20-some years old. The concrete needs, repairs, and there's some roof issues. So there are some things we're planning to do in this next budget cycle at the stadium as well. At the golf course, you'll see a slight increase in the city contribution rate. So the good news there, if you look at the second page, talks about our rounds per year. COVID saw the record-setting number of rounds at Gross Spec. People didn't have much to do. So getting outside and playing golf became a hobby for a lot of people and a way to get out. In fact, we saw a major uptick in the college kids. Remember, during COVID, bars were closed. They figured out that a golf course can be nothing but a bar, but outside. And so we saw a slight uptick in the college students coming out. We've also seen now that it's also gone down a little bit, but it's leveled off, and we're at a good number. We think 27,000 rounds is really good. Since we've taken over the golf course, that's increased close to 40%. So we think it's really good news. Now what we're focused on is the second chart, which is the revenue per round. We're trying to grow that. If you look over the last 4 years, we have grown the revenue per round, which is where we want to continue to grow. And that's just getting people to spend a few more dollars while they're there. So we're going to keep working on it. We're working on a master plan for the golf course, hopefully to be done in the next year, and it'll hopefully give us a guideline for the next few years. I did include, again, some pictures just so you could see that there are things that need to be taken care of at all 3 properties. It's an aging facility, and we've neglected it for a few years, and we need some funds.
All right, we certainly appreciate that. Ms. Green, do you have anything to add before we open it up for additional questions?
No, thank you.
Okay, we have Councilman Daniels and then Councilman Garza.
All right, thank you, President Hussein. Good afternoon. Thank you for coming down. I'm wondering if we can go back to Jackson Field really quickly. At the stadium, I've had a lot of feedback about worry about the roof, and so I just wanted to touch base and see if you had the same worries. I understand that it leaks during the winter because it's sheet metal and it spreads and then contracts, and so I'm wondering if you can, explain that a little bit and then talk about whether or not you feel like the roof needs to be replaced and or what you could do to improve it at a lower cost.
Well, yes, so that metal roof was put on before metal roof, they've come a long way in just the last 5-10 years, right? That metal roof was put on 27 years ago. It's a curved metal roof, which I would always tell people, don't do that in Michigan. Our freeze-thaw cycle, just like the roads, causes that roof to move. And so in the wintertime, yeah, it'll move a little bit. And then when the snow melts, we might get a couple drips and leaks through it. So every few years, we do have the roofing company come out and do a full, one end to the other, making sure everything's still battened down and tight and sealed. But, it's only a few years. It's a 27-year-old roof. I would say that it will need to be replaced probably in the next 10 years. Because their lifespan back then was only about 25 years. Now they're up to about 40 years. But I just say curved metal roofs in Michigan aren't necessarily the best idea. We learn. We would replace it. I would suggest, going with some sort of angle or something like that where it's a little more straight and it's not bent as much.
All right, Councilman Garza.
Thank you, Council President. So I got a couple questions for you guys and a couple questions for the administration. Seeing how that you guys are not allowed to try to request dollars from ARPA, did the city, did you guys request any money from the federal government for LEPFA?
We've not requested money for the federal government, but we have allocated $600,000 from ARPA funds for LEPFA.
Yeah, I'm aware of, I appreciate that, Jake, thank you. Is there a reason why you guys didn't do that, seeing how they weren't able to do that?
I'd have to check, but I believe that we had a community response cabinet that invited a number of stakeholders from different groups throughout the community. But really, we applied for every opportunity we could, and every opportunity that I personally saw that had to do with entertainment and public facilities, entertainment facilities, explicitly excluded publicly owned facilities for a reason I can't explain to you.
Okay, all right, I appreciate that.
Yeah, if I might add, Jake is absolutely right. When you read into a lot of the grants that were eligible, it either excluded organizations like ours or publicly owned organizations. They were either geared directly towards private agencies or they were geared specifically towards a certain distinct, so like Broadway was outlined and really got a lot of money. It was directly earmarked for it. So it was really odd. We did get a state grant, which gave us some funding. We also did get some PPP funding. So we did get a couple items, but a lot of it was not, the way it was written would specifically not allow us to apply for it for whatever reasons.
Okay, all right, thank you. So to piggyback off of that, though, I know you said that that the administration allotted $600,000. Isn't that specifically for revenue loss, though?
It's towards eligible uses as it relates to LEPFA activities. I'm hesitant to use revenue loss explicitly because it gets a little complicated as to how we define that. Particularly the legislation says supporting government services to the extent of revenue losses, and that's just me being technical and obfuscating in terms of a complex question.
Okay, so I mean, but Thank you.
Yeah, sorry about that.
But are they allowed, are you guys, do you know if you're allowed to use that money for, like, the, some of the improvements that you showed us on the slides?
I think there's some wiggle room on using it for improvements, but also towards things that are going to gain revenue. So, the marquees or the signage could be construed if it's sponsorship dollars coming in, that's to help gain, new revenues. I think also certainly using it to make repairs in areas that traditionally held events, which would generate revenue as well. I think that's where we would, make sure that we're on the good, but I think that's the way it was outlined.
Yeah, some specific uses that come up at the top of my head would be facade improvements are covered explicitly in the FAQs, and expenditures that would improve economic development or public health and safety, possibly HVAC style repairs.
All right, thank you. So then, just a couple quick questions. Common Ground, is that happening this year?
So no, to answer the question shortly, no. We are looking for shows to produce anywhere downtown. We've looked at that option, and we will continue to look at options. I in fact got an email today with some ideas. So there's still things percolating out there, but we're going to be very cautious. I explained to someone earlier today that the artists who haven't worked for the last 2 years, I think, are trying to make up all that revenue in 1 year by what they want to charge us all. So I'm being very cautious. I think we need to be conservative coming out of this, not being giant risk takers. So we're looking for shows. We want to produce a few events, but Common Ground, the name, the brand, what people knew of it as, is going to just be set forth for a little while.
Okay. Now, what about the Board of Iron Lake Chili Cook-Off? You guys partnering with them this year?
No, they were partnering with the Lugnuts. We have not been involved with that in a few years, so I don't know what the plan
And then
is.
the last question, sorry, guys, I know we got a lot of stuff going on. Somebody approached me regarding the Lance Center, how we can, boost some revenue. Is there any potential to host like volleyball tournaments or, indoor sporting tournaments like that?
We've actually seen that market be really strong coming out of COVID. As I said, that those events were going to come back faster because we want to go see our kids get back to normal, right? So we host, just this past weekend was a dance competition. We've probably hosted close to one dance and or cheer competition monthly. So that's been one that's really taken off. We have had volleyball tournaments in there. We just had our wrestling tournament a couple weeks ago. We've got another one coming up this summer. Those have taken off. So we've done a lot of different sporting type events because I kind of lumped them all in together. I would even, the dance competitions, you may not think sporting. If you watch those kids, it's sports. They're very athletic in what they do. We've had archery competition in the Lansing Center. So we're open to doing a variety of those events, and they have taken off post-COVID. So yes, we are open to more and more business.
Thank you.
All right, unless I see another hand, I'm going to assume Vice President Wood.
I thought you saw me earlier, but that's okay.
I did not, that's okay.
All right, not a problem. Few questions for you, Scott. I've been harping on this authority for some time. And the fact that you now have legislation that would allow you to look at that. I realize that you're saying it's down the line, but I just really think that it's imperative that we start working on this as fast as possible. I think this has been something that I've been talking about for at least 10 years. You've been there, your predecessor was there when I've talked about this, so, what is the game plan?
So we've already been meeting, the mayor and I and certain county commissioners talk about this. It's a process. So the way, when the law was being constructed, when the bill was being constructed, we did have some input. Some of our recommended, so first of all, when it was being constructed, they didn't realize it applied to Lansing. So we were able to get our nose in there and start pushing for some items to be changed. We didn't get everything we wanted. And one of the things that was not put in there was the way so it's really an assessment more than it is a tax. the county can enact it, but more than 60% of the hoteliers have to opt in. So it's not an opt-out, it has to be opted in, which then means we have to do the legal battle of going and trying to get all the hoteliers to support this. It just can't be a matter of county commissioners making a change and it automatically going in. So it's a process. I have been meeting with the CVB, with some hoteliers to talk about it. I think, we've developed relationships. I think there's been better transparency, so the hoteliers do feel better. It's gonna take all of us lifting it and getting it across the goal line.
Okay. And then, with regards to the signage that you mentioned earlier, I thought we heard some of this at the last budget cycle, that there was supposed to be some improvement in the signage. What?
No,
No?
we just put it in this time. We've had, capital requests each year, but we haven't gotten it. So until we get it, it's an expensive project, so it's going to take time.
All right. Thank you.
All right. We have talked as part of other entities' budgets, wayfinding signage, things of that nature, so maybe that's it. I don't think I've missed any hands this time. All right. Mr. Keith, Ms. Green, we really appreciate you being here. Thanks so much.
Thanks for your time.
That brings us to, I do believe it's the LEDC, or the Lansing Economic Development Corporation. We do have Carl Dorschimer with us, as well as Chris Klein. While they're coming down, I'll just remind folks that we do have 3 departmental presentations left, as well as 6 action items. And the time is 6:26, so we're all cognizant. Thanks so much, gentlemen. I'm assuming the green light's still on. How are you?
Now. Very good. How are you?
Good. It's good to see you. We're going to go ahead and turn over the floor. You want to provide answers to the 5 questions, and then we'll consider questions from the body. Thanks so much.
All right, I'd be happy to. So first question, is that too loud? First question is, what's the difference in your budget from the current fiscal year to the proposed regarding revenues for the EDC? They've gone up slightly, and that increase is really due in part to the Red Cedar bond fees, and then there's also the arts and culture contract, and then there's a little additional funds that was approved by council for the facade program. So a modest increase of about $175,000. And then the Brownfield Authority has about 32 active brownfield plans. And the revenue for the year is anticipated to be about $7.6 million. It's an increase of about $1 million, but that million really is generated by the increase in value of the Red Cedar project. If you've been by there, it continues to, there's 3 different phases, continues to go up. They're on the 3rd and final stage right now. So as the value of that goes up, so does the revenue to the Brownfield Authority too. And then the TIFA is projected to capture about $3.8 million roughly, and of that, about $195,000 is admin that shows up in the budget. So that compares roughly to about what was the up-to-date for the current revised. If you look in there and you look at last year's budget, it's a little lower, but in reality, that Chris has been working with the assessor's office, and that number's been revised back up as a result of going back and looking at and making sure that all the properties that need to be essentially captured are captured. So that's the good news. So that will continue to be at that level of about $195,000. So that's revenues, expenditures. Overall, the LEDC expenditures have increased to match the increase in program and services revenue. So additionally, with the end, as you know, with the end of the LEDC annual contract with LEAP, the LEDC will hire its own staff and has budgeted to do so. So you'll see that in there as a new item. There's fringe and there's salaries. There's also rent in there too that you'll see, because now the employment is being brought back in-house to the EDC. So, but to counter that, the funds that were being used that were going to LEAP for the LEAP contract, those funds essentially cover pretty much all of the new costs, the new personnel costs. It's just a shift. Instead of LEAP providing it, now it's being done internally by the EDC. And then for the Brownfield Authority, the expenditures have increased mainly because of the payments that are necessary on the Red Cedar bonds. Those bonds have been issued in series as the project continues to go up. So there's 3 different series. So therefore, as the project goes up, the bonds are issued and sold, and the revenue is used to pay for eligible activities, but then also you have to make payments on the bonds too. So you have an increase in revenue from the Red Cedar site, but we also have an increase in bond payments, so they match each other. So that's how that's being used. And then regarding the TIFA, it continues to make debt service payments. The largest cost is the bonds on the Lansing Center. And so with the TIFA, the revenue has increased a little bit, but like I say, it's mainly because I think there's more accurate assessment. You did hear from the assessor that there is challenges on properties, and downtown obviously has been hurt by the pandemic. So, in the future, TIFA, we don't know. It's been up and down. It's been a very volatile thing over time. We're hoping that downtown can recover quicker. And typically, just 1 or 2 bad years, don't matter. But if you have 5, 6, 8 bad years, then the TIFA revenue is going to go down. On the other hand, there's other projects downtown that are benefiting from some type of a tax break or a brownfield, and when those expire, then that also, so it kind of balances, checks and balances. So there is other opportunity for additional revenue for the TIFA too. So, but all in all, it's been pretty stable over the last few years, and we've been able to refinance the TIFA debt at lower and lower interest rates, which has really helped a lot too. All right, next question is, are there any changes in services that your department is responsible for, and if so, why? No, the LEDC will continue to provide the same economic development services as before, stated in the annual contract with the City of Lansing. Is there any rate of fee increases? No, there's no increases in fees. So, however, the fees now will go to the LEDC and not LEAP, so that's another source of revenue. Are there any major equipment purchases proposed in your budget? Yes, because now we are moving into our own office, so we will have to, we have one-time only expenses for computers, hardware, office equipment, perhaps some furnishing. And so we've included that. We've amended the current budget to include those, and then also there's some of that in the proposed budget too. And then are there any eliminations, combining or contracting of positions in your budget? If so, provide specifics. Well, previously under the contract with between the LEDC and LEAP provided about 5.5 full-time equivalents. And now, with the end of the contract, the LEDC will be hiring initially 4, but then staffing up another 2, so 6 full-time people. Those will be EDC employees, so that's reflected too. So, and that's the questions. So, be happy to answer any other questions.
All right, Mr. Klein, do you have anything to add?
I do not.
All right. Do we have questions from the body? We have Councilman Garza, Vice President Wood. All right, we'll start with Councilman Garza and Vice President Wood.
Thank you, Council President. Good evening.
Good evening.
So, I guess I have a question regarding Skyview. We have a brownfield development. Is it a contract? What exactly is with Skyview? Because I heard that they are selling the property to another owner, and how does that work? Do they transfer the brownfield, whatever, if it's a contract or what have you, with the new owner?
You want to get that one?
Sure. So typically with a brownfield project, there would be a reimbursement agreement for TIF revenues that outline the process for that and then who they're supposed to go to. I'd have to see within that existing copy, they may assign those. It just depends on the terms of that, whether or not it requires board approval. Sometimes that assignment can happen without board approval, and it's very common that developments are sold and the revenues are assigned either to a new owner or bank, et cetera.
So, I appreciate that. Is the city gonna be up for any potential loss? I mean, I don't know if you're aware, but I had a major leak and they had to displace, all the tenants out of Skyview, and now I'm hearing they're selling it. So after that 20-year development agreement or brownfield agreements is over with and the city starts collecting the revenue from it, I mean, are you guys concerned that it may be full of black mold? I mean, is there any kind of clawbacks regarding that contract or agreement?
Well, they've completed the project as, in the development agreement. It wasn't the UDA, it was the agreement in consideration of development incentives, I believe, at that time. But, project completion has occurred. Of course, there'd be, if there's any public health concerns, hopefully that'd be addressed by the current owner or new owner. But it's typical with, these projects, they've been completed. The revenues will go out. They will be reimbursed for those costs. If for some reason they had to close down the building, then the values would change. They might not be reimbursed for those, but generally, I mean, it's kind of self-controlled in that way. I don't know, Carl, if you have.
Well, for instance, code compliance, building safety, any kind of work they'd have to do would be through the city. The brownfield plan is, essentially a standalone. It does require a development agreement, says you will construct this and this is what it's going to be and you need to complete it by this date, and they met that requirement. But in terms of maintenance, that's up to the property owner. Now, one thing, if they fail to maintain it, then ultimately the value of the property may go down and then the assessed value would go down. The benefit from the brownfield plan would also go down too because, of the market value and the assessed value would go down. But at that point, it's more of just a regular code compliance, whoever it is that, and if they make repairs, that has to be done by a license and you have to pull permits. And so it's like any other property. As far as selling the property, when you build a property and you have a brownfield plan, you met the agreement, you can sell it and there isn't an income stream coming annually because of the brownfield plan. You can assign that to the new owner and they'll pay for that. Sometimes they assign that to lenders too. So like any income stream, it can be used in multiple ways, but it's dependent upon, the value of the building. So, the short answer is, at this point, they met the requirements of the brownfield plan. They met the requirements of the development agreement. What occurs to the building at this point is, more of a matter between them and, the powers that be, essentially.
Okay. All right, thank you. All right, Vice President Wood.
Thank you, President Hussein. Carl, when a majority, or at least half of these brownfields were created, it was when LEAP was involved with them. And the administrative fee was something that LEAP was collecting. So does that mean that when you take over, has LEAP agreed that those administrative fees will then be transferred over to EDC?
Well, there's two different fees. There's the annual fee for the administrative work that we do, and that has always come to the Brownfield Authority. It's never come to LEAP. But when they go through the application process and the approval process, they are charged a fee for that as an administrative and review fee. That has been previously going to LEAP. But now, that fee, and for instance, for a brownfield plan, it can be $5,000. For GM, it was like $15,000. That's going to going forward from July 1st, those fees will go to the EDC. So the majority, the admin that you see in the budget, that in each plan, typically it's like 5% of the annual capture. Right. That has always gone to the Brownfield Authority. And then another part of it has gone into the Brownfield Revolving Fund too.
Okay, and then the unrestricted fund balance that you have is projected to be $7 million. Is that correct?
On the brownfield, Chris could probably explain that. It's a combination of things. Do you see that? You want to try that one?
Yeah. I know that there's a considerable amount in the balance due to the Red Cedar bonds. I don't see that on the.
I'm looking at page 111. Last line.
Oh, so that's the TIFA. So that would have to do with the fund balance to repay that. So it'll capture more than what, the debt service would be on an annual basis.
Right, because when you sell the bonds, you get a large chunk of money from selling the bonds, and then as the developer basically conducts the eligible brownfield activities, they can be several $1 million worth at a time. They submit a reimbursement request that's reviewed by the Brownfield Authority, and then when it's approved, then they get reimbursed. So after the bond, and just recently there was the third series of bonds that had been sold, so that's why there's funds there. But those funds will be used to reimburse,
Then I would think that the definition is incorrect, because they are restricted. Unrestricted funds, to me, means that they can be spent anywhere at any time.
The TIF, that's a good question. We can get back to you on that. Really, there's only one debt service that is currently being paid, and that's listed on here as the Convention Center debt service.
Can I stop you real quick? I think Jake wants to speak to this issue. Go ahead.
I was just going to add that it seems that we're discussing the LBRA and TIFA budget simultaneously, and maybe an explanation of the fund balance might be better served if it was written down so we could talk about the specific accounting of it back and forth and get you a written response. But unless you have an answer ready on hand.
Carl?
Well, regarding the TIFA, quite often they sell the bonds and then the funds are kept, and then you're paying an annual, in other words.
I get that. I understand that. But to me, that would be a restricted fund balance because you're paying them out for a specific purpose. What I'm looking at, and, maybe this is semantics, but I think when I look at that as unrestricted, meaning that it can be used in various other ways.
It could be, but it won't be because it's not in the plan, but.
Okay.
I mean, there's only one, there would be no reason not to use it. If you did, then you would end up short because there's a schedule of payments and the bond's been sold and the funds are kept in that account and it's making payments. So previously there was a couple different debts and now we've down to one. So that's why it looks kind of odd, but it's basically used to pay the debt service. And before any debt is incurred, it has to go through a process of approval for the TIFA board and the city council. Bonds have to be issued. So it could be, I suppose, I don't think that it's restricted because it could be used for anything. But in reality, there's really only one debt service that's being paid right now.
Okay, thank you.
All right, do we have further questions? All right, seeing and hearing none, we appreciate you guys for coming down. I do know that, the resolution pertaining to the smart zone, that will be precipitated or brought forth by your group, but as stated, we will do that during the public hearing, just to save time. Okay, so we appreciate you guys being here.
All right, thank you.
Yep, absolutely. That being said, we are now to the mayor and community media. My understanding is that Jane and maybe Jake will be covering that. So Jane, you have the floor. Thank you.
Thank you, and good evening, Council President and Council Vice President and members of the City Council. As you know, being the Chief of Staff for the past 4 months, it's really an honor to be here with you this evening and present the Mayor's proposed budget for this coming fiscal year. Through this annual budget, as the Mayor for our organization, through our budget, he is able to exercise supervision and coordination over the city's 15 departments. He's also able to ensure that the city's ordinances and regulations are properly enforced, and obviously, most important, we respond to the needs of our residents, businesses, and citizen groups. Now, with that being said, I know that you're anxious for me to respond to your 5 questions. So the first question, what is the difference in your budget from the current fiscal year to the proposed budget? Well, overall, our budget reflects an increase of about 9.4%, or overall about $151,000, and this is attributed to the following changes. The first is the Chief Labor Negotiator's salary and benefits, which are now fully funded under the mayor's budget. We used to fund 80%, and now it's obviously at 100%, so it's an increase of 20%, and that amounts to about $23,000. We also have a part-time business analyst position that was created to support the chief strategy officer, and now it is being absorbed into the mayor's budget, and that's about $41,000. And then also we have an addition of the 311 charge, which is an estimate of about $40,692. And going on to your next questions, are there any changes on service that your department is responsible for, and if so, why? There are none. 3, are there any rate changes or fee increases, and if so, why? No, there are none. 4, are there any eliminating, combining, or contracting of positions in your budget, and if so, provide specifics. Here again, there are none. And then finally, are there any major equipment purchases proposed in your budget? And the answer is no. I quickly move on to the community media department. Obviously, as you know, under the auspices of the Lansing Public Media Center, the community media is responsible for the city's administration of our PEG media network organization or fund. They have a very minor difference in their budget overall. It's 3%. This amounts to approximately $23,000, and this increase is primarily attributed to an increase of $4,980, and this is an allocation that was given to them by IT and Finance for their IT costs. So they had a very small increase in that. If you look at the budget, it says about 9.5%, and as I said earlier, it amounts to $4,980. And again, this is a cost that's allocated to the department for IT and IT costs. So for some reason, they felt that this year they may need additional assistance in this area. And then as far as the other questions, are there any changes or on services that the department is responsible for, and if so, why? There are none. Third, are there any rate changes or fee increases, and if so, why? Again, there are none. 4, are there any eliminating, combining, or contracting of positions in the budget? And if so, please provide specifics. And the answer is no, there are none. And then lastly, are there any major equipment purchases proposed in the budget for this department? And there are none. So with that, I'm pleased to answer any questions, and I'm very pleased that Jake is here with me to help address any other questions. So thank you,
Support
City
and
Council.
assist. Okay, fantastic. Do we have questions from the body? Councilman Brown and then Vice President Wood.
Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you.
I know that looking at this, there wasn't any overall changes that you guys identified, but I do know that there's been a few, since I've been here at least, position title changes. Are you able to provide maybe an organizational chart and definition of a few of the position changes within the department?
Yes, I'd be able to provide you with an organizational chart for our department. Yes, I can provide that.
As well as a small description of some of the newer positions?
Yes.
Thank you so much.
Vice President Wood.
I'd like to add to that request, and with that, not only the position changes, but also the salaries that are for each of those positions, and if that person was changed from one position to another, what their previous salary was.
May I ask a clarification? Just for clarification purposes, because I want to make sure I get you what you need. So to the best of my knowledge, you are asking me to provide you with any of the positions that we had, if there were any position job titles and their salaries, if there were any differences, correct? Or you want to see all of it, and then we can show you if there's any changes. Is that correct?
I want, as Councilmember Brown said, an organizational chart with the names and the salaries for each of those positions.
Okay.
Now, if, let's say, the position was, citizens advocate, if that became deputy chief, and there was an increase from what the salary was before, I want to know what the past salary was and what the current salary is.
Understand. Okay,
Okay.
very good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilman Garza, then Councilman Brown.
Thank you, Council President. And I guess I'm going to be a little more specific and see if you can answer that right now. So Mark Lawrence, for instance, I know he was like the community engagement advocate. I think that was citizens engagement advocate. Is he now the chief deputy mayor? Or does he still have the same title?
Well, he is still, he is still the neighborhood advocate, but he also is I guess for me, I'm looking at the correct, thinking of the correct title. I believe the title is.
He is the deputy chief of staff.
The deputy chief of staff. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, I believe the citizens advocate role is one that's in the city charter.
Yes.
So he holds that hat as well.
Yes. And I apologize. I know.
Executive assistant?
No, go ahead.
I defer to Jim Smirka and his encyclopedic knowledge if he has it.
Let us look at that,
It's
Council.
not, absolutely not.
Let us look at that so that we can get you the right information. Okay.
Yep.
Is it
Chief yes.
executive assistant's in the charter too,
The,
correct?
Say it again.
Executive assistant is in the charter.
I believe so.
Yes,
The,
but not
I'm not the new guy.
citizens advocate.
Right, yeah.
okay. But the only title that I'm familiar with for sure is I know my title, for example. I know that the position used to be called deputy mayor, and instead, to better reflect what I do, we felt that the chief of staff would be best. But that was the title that my position also held.
Councilman Garza?
Yeah, so I guess if you get back, I guess I'd like to see that information as well, because I know I would send community complaints to Mark Lawrence, and I know that now we have a new community engagement advocate. So I kind of would like to know what the differences are, so I'm sending, people to the right person.
Okay, very good.
Thank you.
But just to be clear, Mr. Lawrence is addressing still neighborhood requests, and he's also functioning as the deputy chief of staff as well. He assists both the mayor and I on numerous things.
Go ahead. Yeah,
Okay.
you have the
Well,
floor.
so then does he have two W-2s then, if he has totally different
No,
jobs?
it's the same title. It's one position with two long titles, for lack of a better word here. It probably will just simply change to, to the best of my knowledge, it would just be deputy chief of staff. And that would include, as part of his job description, to be able to address questions from the community. I do that right now as your chief of staff. If someone asks me a question from the community, which I have two already right now that I'm working with, I address their questions.
All right, Councilman Brown, then Vice President Wood.
Thank you, and just to clarify to their point as well, can we have a description of those titles that include, so we understand what the role is, not just the title as well, since there has been those title changes? That would be very beneficial as well.
Okay, thank you.
Vice President Wood, and then we'll recognize the mayor. Go ahead. You want me to recognize the mayor now? Mayor Shore.
Thank you. Sorry, I literally got into my office, turned on the computer to see if this was council time yet, and heard the question. I'm going to back up a little bit. Mark Lawrence is the citizen advocate. He is also the deputy chief of staff, and he is the executive assistant, which is the title under charter. I know that was a question that was asked. What is his role? It's all three. He also handles
Vice President Wood.
He also handles several boards and commissions. We can get into that also with the explanations. It's easy enough.
Vice President Wood.
But again, the citizen advocate is not part of the charter.
No.
Some of the other.
No, the executive
might be.
assistant is.
Yes.
Yeah.
Correct.
I apologize for that confusion.
My comment to Councilmember Garza is apparently it's 311. Okay.
All right, do we have other questions, comments, Seeing none. We appreciate you, Jane. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
That
Thank
brings
you.
us to our last departmental presentation, and I do believe we have the city clerk on hand, Chris Swope. We also have the deputy city clerk, which I would assume is going to come up as well. So Chris, come on down. Appreciate you being here. How's it going, Chris?
Terrific. How are you, Mr. President?
I'm doing well. It's good to see you. Brian, it's good to see you as well, man. All right, Chris, you know the deal. We're going to go ahead and turn the floor over. If you could answer
Okay.
those 5 questions. And then
5
we'll-
questions.
Yeah, and then we'll open it up for questions from the body. Go ahead.
Okay. In terms of the difference between the current year budget and the proposed budget, it's very minimal changes. Our operating remains pretty much the same, and our staffing goes up primarily by negotiated increases with the collective bargaining agreements and other staff increases. We also have additional contracted staff hours for this year because it is a gubernatorial election, and as you know, the 4-year election cycle, that is number 2 in terms of turnout and services required. Changes in services, as I just mentioned, as a gubernatorial year, there will be increased number of voters participating in the election. Other than that, we do not foresee any changes, although it is always possible that the legislature could enact, and sometimes they discuss things that could impact my ability to run elections. So part of the reason I remain active with my state association is to make sure that I can have some voice in that. In terms of fee increases, we have proposed a number of license fee increases. Mostly, we have left them untouched for many years, most of the fees, and we don't want the general fund to, be subsidizing too much of the business related expenditures. So, those are all laid out in the budget. So, I'm happy to answer any questions, although I would also note that we are meeting with the law department. There are a number of business licenses that we think no longer need to be required. There are some that are enforced by other entities, and we'll be looking at that. And we're also, we'll be, discussing enforcement of the ones that we do keep. Major equipment purchases, while we don't anticipate any major purchases this year, we are beginning to set aside money. We received the current election equipment in 2017. It has a 10-year shelf life. It was mostly funded with state and federal dollars in 2017, and they have promised us that they will not be funding it again, and that we need to have quite a large amount of funds set aside as we go into the 2027 time frame. Eliminating, combining, or contracting of positions. Our regular staff, our full-time and permanent and bargaining unit staff will remain as is. And as I kind of mentioned earlier, with the increase in voting and the number of people voting at home, we will need increased temporary workers to help us handle that load, as well as election workers in the precincts. With that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
All right, I did see Vice President Wood's hand up, and then Councilman Garza.
And Councilmember Spatafor, his hand was up too. Chris, I want to talk about the licenses. I realize that you might be in discussion with the city attorney about what might not be required in the future, but we're talking about currently.
Mm-hmm.
So for these licenses, can you explain to me what the procedure is when a license, when someone has applied for a license and it comes up for a renewal?
We give between 60 and 90 days notice to the applicant, which is a courtesy. It's not required, but we do mail notice to any licensee that their license will be expiring. And then the burden is on them to apply. We do provide information when asked about who does and does not have active business licenses. There are several that have a history of people wanting to know that we do post on our website, including Ice Cream Peddler and various other types of licenses. But we lack enforcement of business licenses, and I would say there's a history of when we have an issue raised, we don't always get cooperation in terms of enforcement.
Okay, so if we have someone that's required to have a license that's working for the city and their license expires, do you notify anyone in the city that that license has expired?
No, I don't believe we do. But we have, the most common one that we do have a lot of interaction with other departments on is building records and
Sign erectors.
sign erectors, because they're required to get a permit, and to get the permit, they're required to prove that they're licensed. So we do have a lot of interaction with, on those, but we don't know when they're applying for a permit. The department reaches out to us to verify the license.
Okay. I guess, based on some current issues that we're dealing with, that I'd like to see, and whether it's something that you're working with law or not, some better coordination on making sure, especially when we're talking about people that the city is hiring to do things, to make sure that that license is current, and if it has expired, that everyone is properly notified of that. Then on to your election equipment. What do you believe needs to be set aside annually to make sure that you have money to purchase that equipment?
We put in, and using some of the ARPA funds, there's an amendment to the current year budget where we're putting in $300,000 to set aside, and that's a pretty good chunk. We also, the second 5 years, which we're currently in, we're required to pay about $60,000 in annual maintenance fees for the current equipment, and then the replacement of the equipment, it's one of those things, I think it was about $12,000 to $15,000 a precinct for the equipment the last time, although again, that was predominantly paid by the state using federal funds. So, it could be anywhere. I'm not that good at math in my head, but.
Okay. Thank you.
That gives you an idea. And I will continue to lobby for the state to pay for us and for it instead and return it back to our general fund.
In the
Thank
federal, you spoke at the federal.
All right, we
Yeah.
appreciate that. Very quickly, if you are just tuning in, expecting to see the city council meeting, we are still in committee of the whole. We are actually dealing with our last budget presentation right now. We do have several resolutions and ordinance for action as well as a discussion item, but we will get to city council subsequent to this meeting. Thanks. We have Councilman Garza and then Councilman Spatafor.
Thank you, Council President. Good evening.
Good evening.
I know I asked you this before, but I want it for the record. Regarding like permits or licensures for food trucks, is that something that your office carries?
It is, yes.
And how much is that fee?
I think that's one of the ones that we are proposing to be modified. Do you have that?
Yeah, it's 75, and then 100, proposed rates of 150.
Okay,
Down at the
so-
bottom, transient merchant.
Okay, yeah, they're transient merchants, so at 75 currently, we're proposing that go to 150. It's been 75 for a very long time.
And that's for the whole entire year, correct? Okay, now, as far as lack of enforcement, how do you suggest we go about making sure that, they're not dumping their grease down the city storm drains? Because I hear that's a problem, and it's going to be a big problem if we don't get control of that, because our city's having to pay for, to clean those sanitary lines.
Yeah, I understand. I mean, that, the licensing doesn't even really involve that level of detail. I would suggest that we be working more directly, and this is one that I'm not sure that the city itself should have a direct regulation. I think we should be working with the county health department because they not only look at where they're serving the food, they look at where they're preparing the food and could work with them to make sure that they're disposing of it at their preparation, their liquids that might contain fats that would clog the drains, at the site where they're preparing the food, which would make more sense rather than, dumping it out on the street. But, my office is not out in the field to be able to see what they're doing at the end of the day when they're closing up their food trucks. So, to me, many of them are regulated by three bodies right now. The county health department, if they're in the downtown area, they're regulated by Downtown Lansing Inc., and then they're also required to have a license from my office, and it seems like we're over-regulating them in some ways, and I think you're right, we're under-regulating some of their activities. But our ordinance I don't believe our ordinance at all addresses what they do with their wastewater.
Okay, all right, well, I appreciate that, and I guess this goes to the administration, then, if you guys could do some outreach regarding that, because I think it's going to be imperative that it's going to end up being beneficial for the city to go reach out, whether it's have a grease trap interceptor installed in the city of Lansing, or we regulate that, because it's going to end up backing up into people's homes and causing all kinds of damage. So, thank you.
All right, do we have other questions? Seeing none. Nope, that one.
He passed?
He
It wasn't
came
me.
over and said he has been satisfied with whatever information was shared. That being said, we'll see you up here soon.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks so much. That brings us to discussion action item D. This is a resolution pertaining to a fourth amendment to the lease agreement with Lansing Shuffleboard LLC 325 Riverfront Drive. You probably remember back in 2020, we actually entered into a lease agreement for the property at 325 Riverfront Drive with Lansing Shuffleboard LLC. Since that time, we have considered and approved three amendments to that lease agreement. And before you tonight is a fourth lease agreement. Amendment to the lease agreement. We did have a presentation, did have a public hearing on April 25th. And it deals with, minor modifications to essentially the leased premises, that space. We have about 10 feet two revised lines, one to the north, one to the south. On the south, and this was actually precipitated by city staff, my understanding is that we had actually included public right-of-way. And so this amendment would actually take that public right-of-way out of that leased space. And then to the north, we actually have 14 feet that we're going to add so that they can build outdoor shuffleboard courts, a pavilion, as well as a pathway. There was some conversation at the public hearing pertaining to protected areas near riverfront, near rivers and streams. And that is actually not a charter provision. There is, my understanding, potentially an ordinance on the books that deals with that 25 feet of protected area. However, my understanding is the construction will not take place within that 25 feet protected area. So with that being said, Vice President Wood.
I would move the Fourth Amendment to the lease agreement for the Lansing Shuffleboard LLC.
All right, there is a motion on the floor pertaining to the resolution. Is there any discussion? Seeing and hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. That takes us to a resolution pertaining to community development block grant resources for the 5-year consolidated plan This would be 2022 through 2026, as well as the annual action plan for fiscal year 2022 to 2023. And both plans would be submitted to the Department of Housing and Urban Development. Again, a number of presentations on this. We did have a public hearing on April 25th. This is something, at least with the annual action plan, something that we have to submit to HUD each year. And then obviously every 5 years, we have to put forth that five-year consolidated plan. This pertains to millions of dollars in federal grant money that we receive through the Community Development Block Grant Program, the ESG program, which is Emergency Solutions Grant, as well as our home funds. So with that being said, I'll turn the floor over to Vice President Wood.
I would move the resolution approving the budget as well as the 5-year plan. Also understanding, council members, that there is the potential of the department coming back once they get their final numbers from the federal government for a revised resolution. So at this point, we've not received the federal numbers, but this is the budget that we're presenting. With that, I would move that.
All right, there's a motion on the floor. Further discussion? Seeing and hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. That takes us to F. This is an ordinance amendment. This pertains to Chapter 1300, which deals with marijuana operations in the city of Lansing. The subject amendments actually came to us from the city clerk's office and really pertains to 3 different sections of that particular chapter. So there is a additional provision being proposed under 1300.7, which essentially says that if an applicant receives a conditional approval to receive state licensure but fails to receive that licensure within 24 months, that they can have their conditional approval revoked. Under Chapter 1300.10 as well as 1300.11, there are several amendments, but those essentially reflect changes in our zoning code. May 1st of last year, a form-based code went into effect, and so a number of those zoning categories like H industrial, I industrial became obsolete. So with that being said, Vice President Wood.
With that, I would move the, moving forward, the ordinance on marijuana.
Okay, thank you. All right, there is a motion on the floor. Councilman Jackson.
Just a question. I noticed that it's also on ordinance for passage tonight. Is that because we're trying to pass it tonight also?
I'm sorry, and I should have said, we actually already had a public hearing on this.
Yes.
Yep.
Right. I mean, I recall. It's just, I don't know.
So typically what happens is it's introduced, it's referred, so we actually had the conversation in committee of the whole where we actually set the public hearing, we had the public hearing, it's referred back to committee, and then goes back out for vote. So it's fine, so it hasn't been expedited at all.
Normally do it this way?
Yep.
Okay, thanks.
It's just, it's coming through committee of the whole as opposed to development and planning, or, does that make sense? All right. Further discussion? All right. Sorry, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. It takes us to G. This is a resolution pertaining to a ballot proposal, Act 2, 2022. This pertains to a sale of a portion of North Cemetery. The Parks and Recreation Department is proposing to sell a portion of unused North Cemetery land. I think it's 90 feet by 190 feet. Is that correct, Brett? All right, Brett, why don't you come on down just in case we have any questions. In any event, there is an offer, I think, with regards to this land. There is a developer that is developing residential, I forget how many doors, but residential on an adjacent piece of property. It may be interested in, again, this unused parcel of land, and whether that be to increase the number of doors or to add green space for that particular development, I don't think has completely been settled upon. But that being said, the Lansing City Charter does require, when we're talking about riverfront property, property used for recreation, dedicated parkland, et cetera, that actually goes to a vote of the people. And so with that being said, we do have a ballot proposal before us tonight. Brett, since you're down here, we certainly appreciate, he actually reached out to me over the weekend and asked if I wanted him here, and I said, it would be helpful, because anytime we talk about selling dedicated parkland, we know this is near and dear to people's hearts, and so we certainly wanted him down here to be able to address this, answer questions one last time, and then I'll turn over the floor to Vice President Wood. You got anything to add, Brett, with regards to this?
Just regarding your question, I got it at 89 feet wide and 100 feet deep. 188.
Okay.
188 feet deep, 89 feet wide.
Perfect, okay. Vice President Woods.
I would move the resolution for the ballot language to be put before council this evening.
All right. I guess the only thing I'd add is that the Park Board, my understanding is, did recommend approval unanimously, as well as the Planning Board. And then if approved tonight, this would be submitted before the electors on August 2nd. All right. So with that being said, all those, Vice President Wood.
I won't be supporting this. And the reason I'm not supporting this is when we had the developer before us to rezone his property, the question, and I asked the question because he had talked about the cemetery property, and he had said, and I said, you can't consider that part of this rezoning process because you don't have that property. And so he said, well, I can make it work without that property. And so now knowing that he's now coming back to ask for the property, I'm just, that's not where we were with this. And so, and I understand it's not utilized. I understand that there's the potential, because North Cemetery definitely needs a lot of work, that the sale of this property and putting it, some additional funds in to take care of North Cemetery. I get all of that, but that's not, this isn't like the Parks Board coming to us and saying, this is a recommendation after looking at all of our park systems. This was, again, started from the gentleman who asked for the rezoning, and at that time, he had clear intent that he wanted to buy that property. So I just wanted my explanation on that.
Certainly. Is there further discussion? All right, seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, same sign. All right, motion carries. That takes us to H. This is a resolution to set a public hearing for June 13th in consideration of Local Development Finance Authority Tax Increment Financing and Development Plan Amendment for the Lansing Regional Smart Zone. For folks that aren't familiar, smart zones are contemplated for, allowed for under state statute. We've talked about this a number of times. We have a collaborative effort essentially between Lansing, East Lansing, Ingham County, MSU, as well as the Michigan Economic Development Corporation. And the idea is, to essentially come together collaboratively, to stimulate the growth of tech-based businesses. And so our Smart Zone was established, as well as our TIF that's attached essentially to that back in 2006. What this amendment would do is essentially extend the TIF by 5 years. Carl Dorshimer will be in with us on June 13th before the public hearing to present and ask questions. But with that being said, I turn the floor over to Vice President Wood.
I would move to set the public hearing for the consideration of the Local Development Finance Authority Tax Increment Financing and Development Plan Amendment for the Lansing Lansing Regional Smart Zone for June 13th.
All right, there is a motion on the floor. Further discussion? All right, seeing and hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, same sign. Motion carries, and we are just about done, folks. So we do have an agenda item for discussion, fiscal year 2022, 2023, both the proposed budget and budget policies. We will be looking, obviously, to take a, kind of final consideration and then obviously a subsequent vote next week. What we are requesting, obviously, we've had these documents in front of us, we've had conversations. What we are requesting is that any proposed amendments be in writing to Sherry, if possible, by Thursday at 10 a.m., just so that we can, get our ducks in a row and make sure that come Monday, we are set and established to do the work of council and get this thing, I should say these things approved as required by the city charter. Okay. Are there any questions? All right, so here's what I'd like to do. I'd like to adjourn in just a moment and take a 5-minute break. with the hopes of reconvening at, what do we got? Okay, at 7:25. All right. So with no other business before the body, we are adjourned at 7:20.